Today is Thursday, November the 6th, and I am Joan Gremont, and I'm very happy to interview you today as part of our oral history project of Roots to Boots and the Dallas Jewish Historical Society. And this is Renee Levy in her beautiful home. And Renee, I've known you a long time, so it's really a pleasure to be doing this interview.
Thank you, Joan.
Let's talk first about your life in South Africa.
Okay.
And let's start with why and when your family originally came to South Africa, and what can you tell us about their early lives and early years there?
Okay. My father was Percy Glickman, and he was born in Lithuania in a small town called Kurko. And they were going through he was born in 1910. And they had a lot of Cossacks and a lot of strife and fighting, and his mother always said to him, Percy and his family came from a family of 10 children. He said, the family needs to leave before there's going to be a lot of turmoil in this country. And my dad always had the foresight, even as a young child, that eventually he would leave the country. Unfortunately, none of his brothers and sisters did that. He was probably the second youngest in the family, and decided in 1922 to leave Kurko. So he was 12 years old. He went on a boat and actually took his sister, Rojo. He had one sister that he went with. And they left Kurko on this boat, and on that boat were other landslide. They called them landslide. Those were like their very, very closest friends, and they were like family. They called them like, because they lived in the same shtetl, which is the same little village. And those two men was Max Charney, and that is Louis. Max is Norman Charney's father, and Louis Charney, who is Michael Charney's father. So they all went on the same boat, and they arrived in Johannesburg with a suitcase. He said I think it took them about a month or over a month to get from Kurko to Johannesburg. And he said the conditions were just appalling. How they even survived, a 12-year-old. Sister was older than him, so she was like looking after him.
And did they have family in Johannesburg that they came to?
Yes, he had an uncle who was living in a town the suburb of Johannesburg that is called Hill Extension. And he had a confectionery store. My father came to him as a young boy, left his sister because his sister had to find her own way, and knocked on the door. And this uncle was not a very nice man. He was extremely mean. And he said, look, I'll take you in, you'll sleep in the back of the store on a newspaper, and you will be delivering newspapers in the morning. So you'd have to wake up 4 o'clock in the morning and deliver newspapers for this uncle of his. He then was treated very badly. I mean, hardly any food, had to work, newspapers, then come into the confectionery store, sell things in the confectionery store, go to sleep late at night in the grocery store.
Yeah.
Okay. So now my father was about 16 years old, and he then decided to start working in this grocery store.
But what's interesting, he's had no education past 12
yes,
in
absolutely.
Lithuania.
And had a difficulty in his language.
Okay,
because there they spoke Yiddish. So he obviously had to learn English, no English where he lived in now, as I say, went to work in this grocery store, and the manager really, they took to him. He was such a hard worker. He must have worked 14 to 16 hours a day. He actually, I think he at this stage lived with Michael's father and with Louis. So, wait, Louis is Michael's father, and with Max, and that is Norman, Charlie's father. So the three of them now could put their money together and rent a little one-bedroom. Who knows how they lived. And he then then became a manager of this grocery store. They liked him so much that at like 18 years old, he built up into becoming a manager. And he saved every penny. Pennies, he said, will make you, he said, save the pennies and the pounds will look after themselves. That was always my dad's expression. And he saved and saved. And by the time he was 21, he bought the grocery store. And then from there on, he bought the building. He then became the king of Rosettenville. He owned nearly every property in Rosettenville. He then married my mother. Okay, now we'll talk about my mother, who's Shalamith Glickman. Wolfson. She was Shalamith Wolfson. She was born in 1920. She was 10 years older than my father. 10 years younger than my father, excuse me.
And where was she born?
She was born in a small place called Koppies in the Orange Free State.
In South Africa,
yes.
Right.
And she was one of 6 children. She was the second youngest in the third youngest. She was in the middle. She, as I say, she came from Koppies, very, very poor family. Father was a tailor. Mother was a housekeeper. Very poor. She said often they went to school without shoes on. And then they all her sisters and brothers, very close, wonderful family, moved to Johannesburg. And when she was 20 years old, she then met my father. And they got married. So my mother got married at 20 years old. My father was 30. My father was extremely successful. They lived in a magnificent house in Hill Extension. That's where I was born. And 3 years later, we moved to Lower Houghton into a lovely, beautiful home, 1.5 acres grounds, and my father retired at 40 years old.
Interesting. So you never knew your father's parents because they stayed in Lithuania, and your mother's parents?
Yes, I met them.
So you had grandparents?
Yes, I had grandparents. My grandfather was his name was Morris Wolfson. That's my mother's father. He was an extremely brilliant man, a psychic. He predicted that one day a man will walk on the moon.
Renee, let's talk about your schooling and what you did in South Africa professionally.
Okay. I lived in Lower Houghton. So my primary school was at Saxonwold, and my high school was Parktown Girls High, which was a public school, but it was all girls. We wore school uniforms, Panama hats, went on a bus every day. My mother picked me up from the bus in a little prefect, I can't remember what she drove, and then went to university. I got a Bachelor of Arts degree, and then went to Teachers Training College, taught at numerous schools, and then immigrated to Canada. Did not teach in Toronto as I had a baby. When we came back from South Africa, from Canada, we went back to South Africa, and I taught again.
What did you teach?
I taught primary school at a school called Wendywood Primary School. And then came back to Dallas, and while Alan was building up real estate business, selling homes, I went in with a friend and we sold jewelry. We sold watches, and it was called Tour of a Kind. I went in with Brenda Cam. So we did that, and then started playing bridge and picked up the game very quickly and just had a passion for it, maybe because of my father who always plays cards and I was always watching cards. And then started teaching friends, and from there I then became a bridge teacher and taught for 17 years. And now I play bridge tournaments. I'm about to become a master bridge player.
Fabulous. Lovely. All right, thank
So
you.
that's